What's up, y'all? Back at it once again. A Koski of Fun Day. And we're gonna do out here, my state is Thorough, the state I'm from. And we're gonna talk about the state in Garveyism, my state that I'm in, and its relation to Garveyism. It was the state I'm in right now is Michigan. And it's many people don't know it's many organizations, the UNIA, that was throughout the state that's not really talked about. So this one we're gonna do one of them, which is Idlewild. In the state of Garveyism, you say, my state is Thorough. The first half of the 20th century represented a period of profound social, political, and cultural and economic changes and challenges for African American in rural and urban communities that ultimately fostered a sense of community and identity. In the wake of the First World War, which heightened expectations to fight against European colonial rule in Africa and the Caribbean, and racial segregation and discrimination in the United States, Marcus Garvey's call for Africans appealed to thousands of Africans in the United States and abroad. In 1920 and in the 1930s, Garvey's UNIA, Negro Improvement Association, and African Community Leagues, UNIA ACL, was and remaining the largest black mass movement in modern history, operating on 5 continents with a reputed membership of 6 million followers, organized in 800 branches. This measure of change was best demonstrated through the activism of UNIA branches in Southern Africa, England, British Caribbean, Latin America, and the United States. In many North American urban cities and rural towns, the Garvey movement motivated a large number of African Americans who was migrating from the South to the North, East, West, and Midwest, and Southwest, and the industrial South. At the same time, Garvey's philosophy of race first appealed and attracted record numbers of West Indians to the United States, who were migrating from Jamaica to such states as Florida, Michigan, New York, and Ohio. Garvey's universal plan and vision for redemption also captured the imagination of working middle class African American residents in a Paradise Gardens subdivision of Idlewild, Michigan, a small rural village located in the township of Yates in Lake County, Michigan. A decade after Idlewild was established in 1915, the residents had not only adjusted to nearly 2 decades of external and external pressures in the North, but they also responded to Garvey's call of nationhood, self-reliance, and race pride. Dominating the politics of the day in Idlewood, these early Garveyites organized Division 895 of the UNIA ACL in 1927. The same year, Garvey was being deported to his homeland in Kingston, Jamaica. With the support of the Detroit chapter of the UNIA, which was founded in 1919, Division 895, under the leadership of Leah G. Wilson of Paradise Gardens, so a woman was the head person that was running this, attracted hundreds of vacationers inside and outside the Idlewild community. The scholarship on Garvey and UNIA is well documented in the writings of Cronin, Garvey, Martin, Burkett, Tolbert, Hill, Stein, Smith Irving, James, and Taylor. However, continuing research focused on a micro level is a necessity and to fully appreciate the legacy of Garvey's UNIA ACL in individual northern and southern rural and urban communities of the 1920s, 1930s, and the 1940s. Thus, although research of Martin, Elkins, Lewis, Rosina, James, and Taylor is essential in that it concentrates on the grassroots activism of the Garveyites in the Caribbean, and Osana's scholarship on Garveyism in Nigeria, Elma Tolbert's seminal piece on the Los Angeles branch of the UNIA, which I have a video about of the Los Angeles branch of the UNIA that was ran by another female, Coretta Bass, continues to be the only community studies that locates the movement and its membership in a single geographic area. In a more recent study, Rollins investigated the history of Garveyism among laboring tenants in the southern United States during the 1920s. The UNIA mobilization strategies in southwest Georgia, the Yazoo Mississippi Delta, and the Arkansas Delta. This article fills to fill the void of previous literature on Garveyism by recovering, restructuring, and bringing to the forefront new and unique information about the grassroots activities of the UNIA in Idlewild, Michigan. This case study is significantly different from the other micro-level studies in that the focus is on the rural division in the North, rather than an urban one. The article investigates the original origins and development of Idlewild Division 895, including ways in which the division worked collectively with other divisions inside and outside the state of Michigan for the general welfare and the purpose of preserving the Idlewild community. The mass mobilizing efforts and establishment of these community networks were central to Garvey's plan and the vision of Africa and the nationhood in the United States. Drawn from data collected from the descendants of Idlewild Garveyites, early Yate Township records, and 10 years of weekly news and division reports in the Negro world, as well as community news and events that were published in the Lake County Star and a convention report printed in Garvey's Black Men newspaper. The article has two main purposes. The first focuses on the early role of the year-round African-American middle class professionals and residents performed in the development of the division during its informative years of 1927 to 1929. Second, it investigates the many of the organization challenges and successes faced by the division and its leaders from 1929 to 1936. The study of Garveyism in Idlewild represents a significant development in literature for two basic reasons. First, it focuses on a unique role Garveyism served in the all-black town of Idlewild, Michigan after Garvey's deportation. This division was rather unique in that it was organized in 1927 and flourished during the 1930s rather than the 1920s. Second, Garveyism in Idlewild deserves scholarly attention because, to the extent which African Americans desired to own and preserve land in its all-black rural community in the North, was being fulfilled through mass cultural infiltration of Garveyism. The fact that this division was located in a predominantly black town underscores UNIA emphasis of self-reliance is significant in itself. Finally, the study fills a void in the literature because it makes an important contribution to our understanding of Garveyism throughout the state of Michigan, in that the Detroit Garveyites, Joseph Cragen and J. Charles Popper Zanny and Leonard Smith, central leaders in the Detroit chapter and with the present body, were connected to Idlewild. As Lee observed, few Michiganders, however, realized that their state was once among the most thoroughly organized Garveyite strongholds. Michigan was the site of one of the largest UNIA divisions in the world, and similar 20 smaller branches were scattered throughout the state. Furthermore, several Detroit officers doubled as regional, national, and international UNI leaders. The end of World War I contributed to many social and political and economic changes in the United States and internationally. As American soldiers began to turn home from Europe, the political ferment in the United States called for a return to normalcy, that is, the maintaining of the status quo. To the end of the last days of World War I, the Wilson administration began to inform African American soldiers that the U.S. government was in no way prepared to address racial inequalities in the country, and that their participation in the war should not be interpreted as an opportunity to gain any concessions in American racial policies. Many African American leaders, such as W.E.B. Du Bois, protested strenuously against the blatant unfairness and the hypocrisy of having American soldiers fight to preserve democracy on a foreign shore while denying it to them within the borders of the United States. The irony was not lost on the traditional white supremacist element in American society. Their agenda was to maintain a status quo through a more direct means: violence, suppression of African American political demands. With the East St. Louis, Illinois riots, the Chicago Red Summer of 1919, and Tulsa in 1921, Oklahoma race riot, the stage was set for a series of racial confrontations and mob violence unlikely any before or since. Mentioning these blatant acts of racism and discrimination and oppression is important because of the physical, spiritual, and psychological resistance displayed by African American community, as well as the unbridgeable fissures it created between black leaders in the United States and the Caribbean. Hence, the era of the New Negro movement, aka the Harlem Renaissance, and Garveyism, the African American community not only saw a flowering of black cultural self-awareness and arts, but also a crystallization of black social thought that found expression in Garvey's call for the desire to uplift the race. During the following years following World War I, the riots of 1919 and 1921, and the Great Depression, Garvey's ideas, dreams, and vision, being long and rich black nationalist tradition of previous black leaders, called for race pride, self-reliance, and black economic empowerment. Garvey was more successful than his predecessors in encouraging the substantial black middle class, and working following. This characterization of Garvey's effort to effectively mobilize the UNIA has been misunderstood. Some reductionist, pseudo-Marxist reading of Garvey movement have claimed that it considered mostly largely of petty bourgeoisie find to serve to exploit the masses of black followers. On the other hand, Burkett rightfully note that the most fascinating aspect of Garvey is how and why he successfully extended to what he did geographically, religiously, and across all classes. This illustrates Garvey's ability to recruit indiscriminately as a religious and geographically diverse membership. One of the strengths of Garvey's discourse was he used religious symbolism and brilliant choice of words. His help us to help ourselves terminology and up you mighty race up lines of appeal and Africa for Africans themes all contribute to a successful rhetorical career. Gifted with a prophetic vision, Garvey expressed an abundance of hope among millions of black people worldwide. During the first UNI International Convention held at Madison Square Garden in 1920, when the Declaration of Rights of Negro People of the World were established, Garvey was permitted to open negotiations with Charles D. King, then the president of Liberia, to encourage migration. American colonization and development of the southwest region of the West African country. In 1922, during a recruitment speech in the midst of numerous attacks from various black intellectuals who accused Garvey of misleading the masses, he used themes of economic independence, race pride, and nationhood to create political organizations beyond domestic districts where his followers lived as citizens. He pushed an establishment of independent governments that would be controlled by the black race. Thus, the theme of independent power was central to Garvey's program. He widely encouraged practical steps by which the black community could be outline an economic plan to build factories, run steamships, finance industries in Africa, the Caribbean, and the United States. With the establishment of the Negro world, Garvey reached the pinnacle of his journalistic career. Both the movement and the newspaper were significant. Historian Clark stated, "This movement was considered to be a threat to the colonial powers of Europe, which were entrenched in Africa." There were local, national, and international divisions operating on 5 continents with a reputed membership of 6 million followers, organized in more than 800 branches. Vincent added on the 3rd page of February 3rd, 1929 issue of the Negro World were reports from Uganda, Ceylon, Haiti, Cuba, Jamaica, Nicaragua, Afghanistan, Jerusalem, Cape Town, Pretoria, and London, as well as the national division from reports from New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Gary, Indiana, Detroit, and Idlewild, Michigan. Garvey Thundering Voice was aspiring, not only has successfully motivated millions of black people worldwide to take pride in their culture. Using Harlem as a contemporary capital of black success as his base of operation, from 1916 to 1929, Garvey was able to build a large following among black people in Michigan by emphasizing the themes of race pride, economic power, and black cultural unity and discord. In his discourse, he was successfully encouraging African Americans to establish their own grocery stores, restaurants, laundromats, insurance programs, real estate brokers, resorts, and many other enterprises. He himself had started a Black Dowel Factory, the Universal Black Cross Nurses, and the African Mortar Corps, each with its own uniforms and officers. And with the introduction of the Black Star Line, a fleet of vessels to trade goods with colored people of America, the Caribbean, and Africa, he appealed to tens of thousands of black people all over the world. The decision to name these 2 vessels Frederick Douglass and the SS Booker T. Washington touched the hearts of thousands of African Americans in rural and urban settings. He repeatedly borrowed from their history to promote black pride and love. In honor of Phyllis Wheatley, he built a hotel accommodated by Booker T. Washington's University in Harlem. Garvey had a large following in Michigan, particularly in Detroit and Idlewild. In 1916, he first visited Detroit during a speaking tour and shortly after arriving in the United States. He returned in June 19 and then again on at least 6 other occasions. Prior to being incarcerated in federal prison in Atlanta in 1925, Lee reported that the Detroit chapter of the UNIA-ACL was organized in the following historic First International Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World, which convened in Harlem from August 1st to 31st, 1920s. Among the delegates attending was Reverend A.D. Williams of Detroit, who returned home ready to organize. Detroit Garveyite John Charles Zampi recalled how Williams came back to Detroit with a red and black green flag, and he walked the streets of Detroit accompanied by others playing a tambourine and so on, and began organizing the Detroit Division. The Detroit branch chartered a Detroit Division number 125, later number 407. Experienced an astonishing growth, probably unrivaled in the history of UNIA, except possibly by New York. Detroit in turn gave birth to numerous Michigan branches and division. Soon we had membership over 300, whose ages range from 18 to 75 years old. Zampi noted a Detroit division beginnings. 3 years later, in the spring of 1923, a testimony given to a garbage child for a trumped-up charge of federal mail fraud recorded a dramatic leap in Detroit division membership, then reporting a number of 4,000. A year later, on August 5th, 1924, Detroit President F.B. Johnson announced at the 4th UNIA Convention that the branch was now 7,000 strong and considered a power in the city. Moreover, he had organized and supervised divisions in the suburbs and the neighboring vicinity of Detroit. The Detroit chapter was not only prosperous numerically, but economically. By 1927, 2 years after Garvey was convicted of mail fraud charge and while in prison in Atlanta Penitentiary, his attorney said that the Detroit division owned $50,000 worth of property and assets. Significantly, this is after the UNIA had begun a steep decline in the absence of its charismatic leader. According to Danfrey, Detroit Garveys took to heart the leader's dictum of self-reliance. We bought property at 1516 Russell Street, Zampi noted, and we used it as a branch as the Library, Liberty Hall, or the headquarters. The Detroit division had businesses of all type. We had laundries, restaurants, shoe shine parlors, drugstores. We even had theaters under auspices of the UNIA. The Detroit chapter was significantly instrumental in the expansibility of the UNIA in Michigan. On May 22, 1927, Mrs. Anna Reese, Secretary of the Detroit chapter, reported that the Detroit UNIA division reports, "We, the Detroit chapter, are working to get Michigan organized for the Universal Negro Improvement Association." 2 months later, Leonard Smith, the president of the Acting Commission for Michigan, issued a statement on behalf of Detroit recruitments and campaign to all advisors and chapters of the UNIA in the state of Michigan to increase their membership and proposing discussion of the ways and means and expanding and increasing our activities in this state. According to the records of the New York Central Vision, the UNIA had Michigan branches in 16 cities, including Ottawa, from 1925 to 1926. Although the UNIA movement began to fragment and decline by the mid-20s, the Ottawa Division 895 was just getting organized. Interesting, in the existing literature on Ottawa, there is no acknowledgement of the Garvey organization or its importance to the history of the community. The scholarship of Wilson, Grand, Walker, and Wilson also, for example, appears to be preoccupied with discussion concerning the infusion of the black middle-class clientele in Ottawa, neglecting to address the nationalistic tendencies of the community's history. Perhaps this oversight is because of the correlation of nationalism with the working class. The literature indicates that Ottawa was developed as a place for African-American elite of Chicago and Detroit to rest and vacation, but was also a space where exchanged intellectual ideas and could be unfettered and unfiltered. Thus, as the population began to increase in Yates Township during the New Negro movement, Ottawa served as a conduit where leading African-American spokesmen could be abreast of changes and trouble within the nation and discuss issues relevant to African-American life, culture, and history. 3 prevailing concepts existed in the Ottawa community during the 1920s and 1930s: accommodation, integration, and nationalism. First, African Americans found expression in the concept and the policy of accommodation given voice by Booker T. Washington and his adherents, who believed that accommodation would allow African Americans to prosper while at the same time pose no threat to the existing social and economic order. Second, they embraced the political philosophy of W. E. Du Bois, William Pickens, and the National Association of Advancement of Colored People of the 1920s, which pushed the policy of full integration in the aspect of American life. To that end, the NAACP policy of challenge through the means of granted in the U.S. Constitution and the courts. Finally, Garvey's concept of black nationalism or nationhood was popular in the Idlewild community during that time. It served as a scathing rebuke of the two other contemporary prevailing ideology precepts of accommodation and integration. Black nationalism was best manifested by the UNIA through the mass appeal of Garvey, who saw the plight of African Americans as unsalvageable. Garvey was convinced that the two races cannot coexist with one nation, and consequently argued that accommodation and integration would continue to fall short in the terms was best for the African American community. Garvey reasoned that the politics of the white America would never permit true democratic principles, and thus advocated a nationalist policy that reinforced African American agenda without regards to white American concerns. Commitment with the idea, Garvey was widely accepted among those African Americans residing in Idlewild who were struggling to uplift the race and resist the ravages of white racism. Although the actual founding date of the UNIA in Idlewild it remains unclear, a warranty deed signed May 9, 1927, when John and Ella Hawthorne paid $1 to convert a conveyor lots 9, 10, and 11 and 12 in Block 13 of Wilson's Paradise Gardens for Herman O. Wilson and Leela G. Wilson, Lake County Abstract Company. On October 15, 1928, the mortgage had been signed to Division 895 of the UNIA of Idlewild. William O. Jones served as the division's first president. Charles W. Wilson as a secretary, Moody Burke, Tom Thomas, and John H. Hawthorne, Adam Daniel Smith, and Nero Williams as his board of trustees. The property was secured and donated by the Hawthornes, which is purchased for $500 with a principal payment of $10 or more, per month, beginning November 15, 1928. Herman and Leah Wilson, who came to Idlewild in the 1920s, was not only the largest property owners at the time, but were the devout Garveyites themselves. In 1929, Layla served as the first lady vice president in the division. In the year 1929, represented the most important year in UNIA history. Internal conflicts were public as Garvey denounced the race traders, leading the UNIA into bankruptcy. This charge initiated a major organizational split as Garvey announced the formation of an unincorporated UNIA of the world, and that should be headquartered permanently in Kingston and would serve as a rival parent body to the original UNIA Inc., which is headquartered in New York. The year also marked a somewhat significant organization development for the Detroit chapter in the Idlewild division. Joseph A. Cragen, who was born in British Guyana, served as Detroit Division General Secretary, and his secretary is one of Garvey's most trusted lieutenants. When Garvey was in prison in February 1925, immediately following his last visit to Detroit, Cragen was one of the leaders of the largest division that Garvey entrusted to maintain the UNIA until its release. From 1927 to 1928, Garvey served as the parent body special representative to Florida. When Garvey's sentence was commuted in later 1927, Cragen was a member of the committee that saw him off at New Orleans, Louisiana, when he was deported to Jamaica on December 2nd. Later in 1928, Garvey appointed Cragen High Commissioner or District Leader for Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. The year following, he was one of two Michigan delegates attending the UNI convention in Kingston, Jamaica. Garvey recognized Cragen and Reverend Father Albert Glenn Taylor, newly elected president of Idlewild Division 895, as two progressive delegates for the other six International Convention of Negro Peoples of the World under auspices of the UNIA of the world. The Idlewild Division of UIA was probably to celebrate the presidency of Reverend Taylor, who came from the community from New York in January 1929 after serving as a delegate during the 1921 International Convention of New York, and as president of the Brooklyn Division in 1925. Cronin noted that it was typical for Garvey to rotate his loyal and trusted aides to build up some organization weaker divisions. Garvey appointed Taylor, the president of the Brooklyn Division, for the purpose of increasing the membership. It is suggested that Taylor's presidency in Idlewild was recognized as another progressive development. He served a role within a one-year period by helping to preserve the quality of residential life for the citizens in this all-black town. A considerable amount of energy and time was devoted in easing some of the Idlewild concern, about the integrity of and a possible takeover of the UNIA organizations. Within a few months after Taylor's arrival, members of the organization responded to criticism via a editorial published in the Lake Star County Star on April 19, 1929, stating that the UNIA is a friendly, humanitarian, charitable, educational, institutional, constructive, and expansive society, and is founded by persons desiring the utmost to do the work to the general uplift of the Negro peoples. The members pledged themselves to do the all in their power to conserve the rights of mankind. This emphasized the concept of universal brotherhood, humanitarianism, and which was taken verbatim from the UNIA Constitution and books of laws, was brilliantly linked to the idea of connecting with the functions and responsibility of citizens who were concerned about race improvement. The letter continues stressing the importance of the UNIA motto, believing always in the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God. Our motto is one God, one aim, one destiny. Therefore, let justice be done to all mankind, realizing that the strong oppresses the weak, confusion and discontent will ever mark the path of man. With love, faith, and charity towards all, the reign of peace and plenty will be heralded into the world, and generations of men will be called blessed. Although the division embraced these themes of institutional building, cultural identity, and black achievement, it took a religious character of the movement very seriously. This reflected in the belief in Garvey's well-developed and eternal consistent theological framework, which gives us a meaning to their history and their destiny under a God who's working on their behalf. In addition to linking their distinctive religious worldview to their lived experiences, the division responds to their critics conveying a self-conscious theme of community building. There have been quite a bit of misunderstanding in the aims and the objectives of the UNIA, but with the present president, this is being wiped out, and we are thankful. This organization has reached the homes of millions that need to be an awkward and a more serious side of life, and a shared responsibility of being citizens and having more regard of the world at large in the right way. This organization believes in race purity and advocates all religions and disagrees with none. For Garvey, Division 895 and in UNIA elsewhere, Garveyism implied not only the concept of race purity, but the non-sectarianism. As Burke stated, his emphasis on the religion meaning of the organization was not only stressed the discourse and the general organizational philosophy of Garvey, but has also said the identity among the UNIA consistency, which consisted of active members in diverse black denominations. The division made rapid strides under Taylor's leadership, and he shared in lectures into the mentorship and the visions about ancient African history. Labored to increase the membership rolls of the division and establish important contacts with African American clergymen and women, successfully motivating leadership members to sponsor entertainment in Baldwin and Liberty Halls to raise funds and purchase uniforms, and to prepare and serve dinners for an entire week in August at 25 cents a plate to raise money to buy materials and flags and pennants. In addition to these small successes, there was yet another progressive activity that occurred under Reverend Taylor's leadership. As the division was preparing for the arrival of other Michigan divisions that was to attend the annual Legion encampment, the Legion encampment, which is meant to lengthen of a season, was indeed a major undertaking for the division. The program committee was continuously busy finding sleeping accommodation for about 1,000. Among the division participants at the event, the Detroit division was the first to arrive and was 375 strong. Where some others camped in Paradise Park, others stayed with local residents in the nearby Cherry Valley and Idlewild Terrace. The Idlewild division of the UNIA grew up rapidly following the encampment, as it gradually began to overshadow the program of the NAACP in 1929 and as well into the mid-30s. In spite of the tremendous success of this encampment, Taylor's most enduring legacy as division president, however, unfolded as he garnered international visibility and regional and national support for the division. Taylor served as one of 3 Michigan delegates during the 6th International UNIA Convention held at Kingston, Jamaica, from August 1st to August 31st, 1929. Taylor was immediately recognized as an important UNIA division leader on August 19th following an interview held with the black man, as he proposed a possible solution to Jamaicans' impressive economic problems and elaborated on other matters during the convention. This, in turn, heightened his credibility as an experienced and widely read division leader. Following Garvey's opening address to nearly 20,000 convention attendees, 3 delegates, Taylor, Idlewild, Benjamin Sumlin, Chicago, and Bishop J.D. Barber of the Triumphant Church, Youngstown, Ohio, made shorter speeches that was enthusiastically received. Taylor, in particular, delivered a rousing speech expressing his thoughts about the mounting problems with the American wing of the UNIA and about his presidency in Idlewild, Michigan, a small suburb town with a very small population. Taylor was clear in noting, the majority of the population of Idlewild are members of the UNIA. The chief officer of the township is a member, the justices of the peace are members, the constables are members. In fact, every civic officer in Idlewild, Michigan is a Garveyite to the core. And they want the people of Jamaica to know, together with their delegates, they are going to follow Marcus Garvey until the sun goes out, because we, the American Negro, are in a better position to understand the feelings of the white race relative to us. The message was warmly welcomed. However, as he neared the end of the speech, he spoke of the enemies of the UNIA in Jamaica and advised them to insist trying to be the best possible Englishman and try to be the best possible Negro. Taylor understood how racism helped sustain slavery and subsequent forms of oppression and discrimination in the United States were present in the African diaspora of the Americas. Hence, in highlighting some of the benefits associated with the United States, where African Americans earn wages in comparison to the economic viabilities of their brothers and sisters in Jamaica encountered. Taylor was clear to warn that this does not mean anything to a white man once in America that a Negro cannot aspire for. Rather, he observed, by way of analogy, our position in America can be favorably compared to the condition of a mule and an automobile. Taylor's speech served as a reminder to the audience that the vast majority of the enslaved Africans in the United States are aware of the fact that they were essentially forced and transferred from Africans to Caribbean societies. To that end, Taylor visited the British Caribbean nation, presented a major achievement for the Idlewild community. Even though their actual number of members in the community were relatively small, the arguments he opposed during the convention resulted in his being identified and selected by Cragen, the Speaker of the convention, to serve on several committees. In particular, the Agricultural Land Committee. The goal of this committee was to identify and acquire and control agricultural lands for the purpose of establishing factories, industrial institutions in various communities in the United States, Africa, Canada, Europe, the West Indies, and South and Central America. As the convention was coming to a close, Taylor pledged on behalf of the Idlewild Division $500 to be paid quarterly, half a year, or in yearly installments to execute a program decided on during the 6th International Convention. The mass political efforts Taylor's encouraged in Jamaica and Idlewild during and the following convention was easy to receive. 2 weeks following the convention, the UNIA in Idlewild received a telegram message from Taylor as he laid over in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. On his way home, stating he will arrive in Idlewild on the 30th. This confirmation of Taylor's travels and his international and national contact sustained interest in building a nation in Idlewild and conveying to the division a sense of community. The division read Taylor's letter with great pleasure, and during a weekly business meeting prior to Taylor's return to Idlewild, a letter of thanks he wrote to the editor of the Black Man was published. Thus, on October 20th, 1929, the Honorable and Reverend Albert G. Taylor expressed many thanks to his friends in Jamaica, stating, he begs to return thanks to all those who helped make his stay in Jamaica a happy one. He had a big welcome from his division, and they were glad to see him and hear the news of the convention. His division has arranged to carry on a drive of Negro emancipation, more than before, and are ready to give all there to the movement. He says, carry on, Jamaica, Idlewild is behind you. The members of the division of 895 held a special meeting as they welcomed back their president home. During his next weekly meeting, October 29th, the vice president, Reverend George Rainey, introduced the president, who shared information about the proceedings. Taylor brought in a very inspiring message from the convention outlining individual changes and asking for cooperation and membership in putting over the big program. Taylor's term ended the first week of February 1930. However, the contributions he made to the division were in effect the future developments of the organization were significant. He not only helped to increase the division's visibility locally, internationally, and nationally, but he also outlined a future plan for the division that could be actualized in the next 10 years. Taylor was instrumental in increasing the membership of the division. In the final meeting following the February 9th, the meeting of the division, two important decisions were made, which would ensure many challenges and success for the division over the course of the next 6 years. The first, which took immediate effect, concerned Reverend George R. Rainey. The former vice president of the division was elected new president. The second decision, which was referring to the next regular business meeting, unfolded in the communication of the Secretary General, Lady Henrietta Benton Davis. We got a video on her too. Lady Davis' statement, which appeared in front of the page in the Negro World, noted the new charter for the division of 895. Although the members of the NCLU, the UNIA-ACL members in most divisions was dwindling in size nationally, and some extent internationally, the presidency of Rainey was an initial head of Division 126, helped to increase Idlewild Division membership, and without question, achieve some minimum success in getting a new charter approved. Reverend Rainey was an active member of the Reverend Harry Franklin Bray Tabernacle Church, and on many occasions was responsible for delivering the Sunday sermon at the Reverend Bray's absence. Reverend Bray, who also supported and spoke at UNIA meetings, came to Idlewild in 1921 after retiring as pastor of several African Methodist Episcopal churches in Arizona and Kentucky. This graduate of Wilberforce University and Payne Theology Seminar was a Garbier to the core. Having been trained in the AME tradition, Bray was responsible for bringing the first formal worship to the service to the community of Idlewild. Reverend Rainey had established and maintained an alliance with Reverend Bray, which significantly contributed to the success of the incoming president of the UNIA division. As the principal speakers in April 1921, April 21st, 1930, regular business meeting under Rainey presidency, and Reverend Bray spoke, saying that he thanked God that he was black, even though there's lots of us who gets top-heavy. The Reverends Rainey and Bray were religious race men. However, struggling to keep the vision alive, Rainey was also continuing the tradition of fostering a network of interstate relations and community networks among the Michigan divisions. Initially, Rainey invited and recruited Reverend Oliver Motley and his wife, Mary, and their daughter, Paulina Muskegon, to the division meetings. During Motley's second meeting, Reverend Motley gave a short talk on unity. However, Motley's third meeting brought good news to the division as Reverend Motley spoke of a new club in Muskegon. So now they're building a bigger one in Muskegon in western Michigan, which soon sent for a new charter. The fifth meeting included a short talk by the lady president of the Muskegon Club, Mrs. Pauline Motley, after which Oliver W. Motley spoke on Garvey Day and said, "God bless this day because this is a black man's day." Motley, who came to Michigan in 1929 from Louisiana, according to the 1930 census record for Muskegon Heights, went on to introduce a plan whereby a market of products for the Negro farmers of the South so they can get something for their labor. In consideration for the great economic problems that faced the Southern farmers during the Great Depression of 1930, the Idlewild Division was progressive in assuming responsibility of establishing and strengthening contacts with the Southern black sharecroppers and tenant farmers to reduce the problems. This may have been a division response to, as Robinson noted, landowners who kicked sharecroppers and tenant farmers off their farms in response to New Deal programs under the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Whenever the reasons, the division labored to build an alliance with Southern black farmers as a way to restore prices that would be acceptable for everyone. This alliance may also suggest that as part of a regional collaborative between Idlewild and Muskegon divisions, that Motley was important to Rainey's presidency as he linked pragmatic needs and agenda for African Americans in the North and South community. Although it's not clear how significantly this alliance will benefit Idlewild, it's clear that the success of the division system of networking outside the state. Elizabeth Thompson, an active member of the Idlewild division and sister of Venus Smith, the lady president of the division, gave a report on her visit to Gary division, where she met and discussed UNI business with Madame Maggie Louine Taba de Mena, who had joined Lady Davis at the top levels of the UNIA. Indeed, Thompson's role as representative of the Idlewild division and a guest of the Gary division suggests that a partnership was being fostered between the two divisions. And during the twilight years of the UNIA, women played an important role in the organization. In addition, Mott and Brindley noted that although Garvey was losing organization support in Gary's black community following his conviction of mail fraud, the UNIA in Gary, Indiana remained strong well into the 1930s and was active into the 40s. In addition to establishing the context of the UNIA division in other states, the Ottawa division continued to support Marcus Garvey as Reagan's term came to an end. During the November 2nd meeting, Edmund G. White, then also a township official, spoke very forcefully on a message from the chief. White businesswomen, Leda G. Wilson, and Trustee Township Moody Burke and Henry Brown joined the township justice in peacemaking and supporting statements about Garvey and Garveyism throughout the meeting. The preamble and objects and the aims of the division were constantly being read, particularly as new officers are about to be installed. The January 4th, 1931 business meeting opened up with Lee Porter as the elected president of the division, in addition to establishing important contacts with Dr. Emmanuel M. Clark, the newly appointed vice president of Ferris Institute in Big Rapids, which is now known as Ferris University. Porter visited George Roxbury of Reed City to discuss the concerns of his member about the issue of taxation. Under Porter's leadership, Garveys would continue to maintain key positions in local governments in the town of Yates Township, although other racial uplift groups in Ottawa, such as the NAACP, labored to control the government in the community. The Garveyites dominated the village government until 1936. However, by the end of Porter's presidency in 1931, the UNIA had witnessed another major split between Cragen of Detroit and Mr. Garvey, as the two exchanged charges of corruption. In addition, the division was to ensure many challenges and fewer accomplishments between 1932 and 1936. Although the Negro World ceased production in mid-1933, Division 126 continued to publish its division reports in the form of community news in the Lake County Star bi-weekly. The Lake County Star was a communication channel to disseminate important reports about business of the organization. As seen in the reports during the periods in the Ottawa UNIA history was dominated by national news about the Great Depression, as well as the organization's continual efforts to continue its positive interstate and interstate relations between Michigan, Illinois, and the Indiana Division. However, the division sometimes became distracted as it paid close attention to emerging independent and progressive and loyal brotherhood bodies, which was increasingly interested in garnering support within the African American communities of Detroit and Ottawa. Thus, the most significant challenge the group faced evolved from the formation of an organization, Our Own, which was incorporated in the state of Michigan and Detroit on March 4, 1933. Our Own evolved in promotional efforts of a Japanese citizen in the United States legally under the name of Naki Kane. Sometime in 1933, Naki Kane, aka Shobita Tashi, was invited to one of the division's business meetings to garner black support for Japan. However, following Nakatishi's visit, he was arrested in Detroit and charged with illegal entry into the United States. The Nakatishi deportation influenced two reactions among the UNIA in Ottawa. First, it resulted in the division's loss of almost half its members. Second, it motivated some of the remaining members to form another UNIA store organization, which they called the Progressive Club. This organization was more interested in the Pacific movement, which involved people of color throughout the world, including several countries in Asia. However, as the Pacific Progressive Club garnered support in the community, it eventually became a social club in 1936, a few years before the Second World War. This meant that the original UNIA, though small in numbers, would continue to support Garvey's message, although he's about to leave Jamaica from London the following year. The division continued to invite UNIA members from other branches to speak. One of the first to speak in 1934 was Leonard Smith, former president of the Detroit branch. Smith traveled to Ottawa to deliver a timely evening message address at Liberty Hall, July 8, 1934. 2 years following Smith's visit, Reverend L.W. Halpern of Chicago continued to have rival services at Liberty Hall, where there was a splendid interest being manifest at each meeting. Nearly 2 months later, Reverend William F. Davis of Saginaw preached at the UNIA. Reverend Eugene Crump of Gary, Indiana, followed Reverend Davis, who served as pastor of the Church of God and Saints in Christ, as a guest speaker. Reverend Crump preached during the evenings and many times accompanied by a musical feast. The significance of these meetings were possessed many characteristics of religious services. Typically, these meetings were held on Sunday evenings and began with hymns, singing prayers, ceremonies by local and regional clergymen and women, special rituals divided to give local groups a sense of identification with the national organization, and such public readings of the front page of the Negro World was always written by Marcus Garvey. The implications of these revival of Garveyites in Idlewild and elsewhere were to reinforce the doctrine of UNIA, which crossed age, gender, class, and religious lines. The early 20th century represented a profound social and cultural, political, cultural, and economic changes and challenges for the African Americans living in North America. The First World War not only heightened expectation, but added to the emphasis of Africa's fight against colonial rule on the continent and the Caribbean, and not to mention racial segregation and discrimination in the United States, but also ensured Garvey called Africa for Africans, would appeal to thousands of black people in the United States and abroad. Garvey took hold of ideas immediately, and with the development and the eventual decline of Garveyism in the United States, even after his deportation in 1927, the UNIA-ACL doctrine continued to spread in Idlewood. And while Division 126 eventually lost political control of the local government and ownership of a few commercial enterprises in the area, the resident collective memories of Garvey and the UNIA have been undoubtedly the most important cultural and Pacific moments discussed in Idlewild's history. Unfortunately, this area reached until recently has been grossly overlooked in most historical accounts of the Idlewild community. However, the surviving early UNIA in the Idlewild community in the late 1920s, 1930s, this essay discovered how the philosophy of the UNIA was the same thanks to motivation, passion, grassroots activism of division leaders in various communities inside and outside of the state of Michigan, who mobilized behind Garvey's plan and vision for future generations of beloved blacks that was scattered throughout the worldwide. And there you have it. This is just one branch. Like I said, there was 20 branches in the state of UNIA, and the state of Michigan was the most thoroughly organized state under the UNIA banner, and probably the most wealthiest, with Detroit and the auto industry and all the reflux that came down from that. Well, much love. Like I said before, this is, Koski a fun day. Spitting the real. Hopefully y'all, subscribe to the channel and hope y'all learn something. I'm going to do a series on the whole state of Michigan UNIA. This is the first one that's dropping down. My state is thorough for organization and the home of African nationalism. We're going to get into all these groups that came out of Michigan. So much love to y'all. Peace, and have a good one.